Hello and welcome back to Matt Hayes' Tottenham Blog and to another Jose Mourinho discussion show. I feel like we're doing a lot of these lately, but it's something that is very, very relevant in the Spurs fan base at the moment. I'm going to read a quick little quote here about a Spurs manager. It says, "You had to be patient with him. He would start most interviews by saying he had nothing to say and would then talk from the soul about the game he loved. He was at his most quotable in defeat and would show no mercy to any player he felt had given less than 100%. Quote following a Spurs defeat, he said, "I can forgive anything but lack of effort. Today, there were some players who should feel ashamed of their performance. I will not tolerate anybody giving less than their best. It is an insult to our supporters." I read that quote in a magazine a little bit earlier today, and it's about Bill Nicholson. And I read that, and it screamed Jose Mourinho to me, a manager who will say what needs to be said in whatever forum he is given the platform to say it, regardless of the repercussions it may have, and regardless of how publicized his qualms with his players might be. Now, that is why this stream is called The Similarities Between Jose Mourinho and Bill Nicholson. And I said it in the live chat a while ago. I said the similarities aren't necessarily positives. And in this case, this similarity is a huge negative. People often speak of how Jose Mourinho's tactics are outdated. But as I said in a Twitter thread a while ago, which I'm going to run through and go through in a bit more detail, it's not Jose Mourinho's tactics that are outdated. It's his man management skills. And it is almost his entire approach to the things surrounding the game on the pitch rather than the game on the pitch itself. Now, look, the players are not out of the blame in this one. The players have fallen into the trap of this modern day culture in football, the player power, everything that is giving the entire control of the game to the players. They're not out of the blame, but today we're going to focus mainly on Jose Mourinho and how he has failed to change despite what he said in recent months, in recent years. When he left Manchester United, had his 9-month sabbatical, he said he refound himself as a man, as a manager, as a person. He hasn't changed. The same problems are there, and I think they're the same problems that will prevent him potentially from being successful at Spurs. We're going to run through this this thread that I put out a while ago. Anyone who follows me on Twitter may have seen it. If you haven't, follow me at Matt Hayes THFC. Wayne Bonnet saying this should be interesting. Eccleston saying good afternoon, Matt Hayes, and Fen here as well saying all right, folks. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you for joining. And we're just going to run through this. I've just read this quote describing Bill Nicholson, and it could easily be mistaken for a description of Jose. I'm going to just go through a bit of the quote again. He said, "You had to be patient with Bill Nick. He would start most interviews by saying he had nothing to say and would then talk from the soul about the game he loved. He was at his most quotable in defeat and would show no mercy to any player he felt had given less than 100%. Bill said this after a defeat at Palace in 1969. He said, "I can forgive anything but lack of effort. Today, there were some players who should feel ashamed of their performance. I will not tolerate anybody giving less than their best. It is an insult to our supporters." Again, something you can easily imagine coming out of the mouth of Jose Mourinho. Like I said, people say Jose's tactics are outdated, but it was Daily Hotspur who put it fantastically on Twitter, put it better than I ever could. His man management has been rendered moot by player power. Just before I go through what Daily Hotspur said, I also added players no longer need to buy into a manager's style or philosophy, although Jose doesn't like the word philosophy, because they are in control. And the sad truth is one bad apple in that dressing room is enough to threaten Jose's entire tenure at the club. Now this, the next bit I'm going to talk about is from Daily Hotspur on Twitter, talking about why things may have gone poorly for Jose Mourinho. He said, "I feel sorry for Jose Mourinho. People label him a dinosaur for the way his teams play football, when in reality, it's the dressing room culture which has changed. Players now have all the power due to various different factors such as agents, etc. We saw this very evidently at Manchester United, especially with the personalities in that dressing room. You're talking the Paul Pogba's, the Jesse Lingards, Jose's football requires full buy-in from the players and players who are willing to go to war for him. Sir Alex and Jose are two great examples of managers who had much success from having full control over the dressing room. When you look back at old Jose videos, you see just how important this is to the way he is as a coach and his footballing philosophy. His players in the 2010 Champions League semi-final gave everything at the Nou Camp to win. Players nowadays just aren't like the John Terrys and Javier Zanettis of old. That, to me, is why you need either to give Mourinho full control to get 11 players like Harry Kane or Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, or just accept he's not the right man for your club. Mourinho's time at the top is probably over unless a club is truly willing to back him, but not through fault of his own. It's just the way the culture of the game, if not culture at large, has gone. Labeling him out of touch and the constant hounding him out, I think, is unfair given how much he has achieved in the game. And that, again, is coming from Daily Hotspur on Twitter, something that I absolutely agree with, and I think it's really, really well put. And there's a few points there that I do want to touch on. One of them is, to me, that is why you need either to give Mourinho full control to get 11 players like Harry Kane or Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, or just accept he's not the right man for your club. And that is something that I have been saying for quite a while, even back probably before the turn of the year, that yes, Jose, without a shadow of a doubt, has the potential to be very, very successful at any club he goes to. But the one thing that he needs is to build that squad that he knows suits both his tactics and the way he does like to approach the game, the way players need to 100% buy into what he's doing. And that's why I do feel as though the problems with the defence, yes, you can blame Jose Mourinho, because at the end of the day, he is there to make that defence better. It is his job to make that defence the best they can be. But at the end of the day, he can only work with the tools that he has been given. And the likes of an aging Toby Alderweireld, Davinson Sanchez, Eric Dyer, and two centre-backs in Jaffa Tanganga and Joe Rodon, who aren't experienced at this level whatsoever. There's only so far Jose Mourinho can bring that defence. Now, we saw towards the end of the summer transfer window that Tottenham went all out to try and get a centre-back. Steve Hitchen was out in Milan trying to complete the signing of Milan Skriniar from Inter, and he failed to do so. And in the end, we brought in Joe Rodon on the deadline day for the EFL transfer window from Swansea. Now, yes, he's been a fantastic signing. He's undoubtedly a player for the future, and he has in the last couple of weeks stepped in and probably been our best defender, but he is not a defender good enough to carry this defence through a season. And it is as simple as that. Now, you can look at the Premier League table and say that Tottenham have conceded, or they're the third best defence in the Premier League. And yes, that is true. You can't deny that. That is outright factual. But what you have to realise is that the numbers don't tell the entire story. This Spurs side at times has been afraid to attack because they know the vulnerability of the defence behind it. And the best example I can use for that is the game against Wolves earlier in the season. We went 1-0 up inside 30 seconds. Tanguy Ndombele scored. We dominated for the next 15 minutes. And then as the game went on, we became more and more pragmatic. And for the last 20 minutes, ended up sitting completely behind that ball and defending in the typical Park the Bus Jose style before Ben Davies lost his man at a corner and Roman Saiz headed in the equaliser for Wolves. Now, side note, you can't blame a manager for an individual mistake, which is a thing that has been very costly for Spurs this season. But the way I looked at that game, and yes, I wish Spurs had gone out and attacked, but the way I looked at that game was, if Spurs had tried to dominate that entire game and continue to press high, to keep possession high up the pitch and try and keep Wolves penned back in their own area, we that day were playing a back three of Ben Davies, Eric Dyer and Toby Alderweireld. If Wolves at any stage had gotten a counter-attack on that back three, they were in on goal, because they had Pedro Neto, they had Daniel Podence, Adama Traore and Fabio Silva, four very, very quick players against an ageing, slow defence. At no stage on any transition for Wolves were Tottenham in control of that. So you can say Spurs did only concede one goal in that game, and that is why perhaps the goals conceded numbers look a little bit better than they actually should look for Spurs this season. But the lack of capability in that defence and the lack of trustworthiness is something that affects us going forwards and make players less they don't want to attack as much because they feel as though they can leave their own defence exposed, which really isn't something that any team should really be in a position to deal with. Now, I continued on in this thread. I said football is a results business. That is the nature of the sport. But who is in most control of the results? It's the players. There's only so much Jose can do to affect what happens on the pitch during the 90 minutes of a game. One of the things that I saw, a stat that suggests the players are very, very culpable for this, which I don't think anybody is going to deny, is that Tottenham have made the most unsuccessful passes in their own defensive half this season. 911 misplaced passes in our own half this season, which I think is 5 more than any other team in the Premier League. Again, individual mistakes, sloppiness on the pitch isn't something that Jose can be held accountable for. But I am by no means excusing Jose of any blame here. Jose often claims he tells his players to attack in games where they ultimately don't. I firmly believe Jose tells the truth when he says that. There's no doubt in my mind Jose in the dressing room is telling Son, telling Kane, telling Lamela, Lucas, whoever it is, to attack. He's telling his fullbacks to push on and attack, maybe telling Ndombele in that double pivot to push even further forward and involve himself in the attack. But telling a team to attack isn't enough. You need to give them the tactical tools to be able to dominate a game and to be able to carry out sustained attacks and hurt the opponent. I don't think Jose is doing that. We heard not too long ago that Spurs still depend on attacking tactics learned under Mauricio Pochettino in games to today. Because Jose Mourinho does not do enough attacking training to give them the tools to carry out what he wants them to do. That is very, very worrying and completely unacceptable. You look at that chance Spurs had 52 seconds before Newcastle scored their equaliser on Sunday when Harry Kane ended up hitting the post. Lamela, his decision-making was questioned in the counter-attack. Had Kane on his left, Son on his right, and held on to the ball for too long, didn't know what to do with it, eventually fed the ball into Kane, who worked the opportunity very well and hit the post. 52 seconds later, Newcastle found their equaliser and cost Tottenham a place in the top 4. Now, everyone is entirely within your right to question Lamela's decision-making there. It was poor, he did not know what to do, and he panicked in the moment under the pressure. However, there is nothing to suggest that Jose Mourinho has trained these players and gotten them ready for situations like this. You can argue that, yes, players who have played with each other for as long as these guys have So if you're looking at the three involved in that attack, the last 5 years they've been playing the Spurs together, despite injury concerns hindering the amount of time they've played together. But Jose needs to tell them, he needs to train them what to do in those situations. And from what we're hearing, he's not doing that. There should be a set out plan there that when we get forward, Son, he's making us run on the right, Kane on the left, who does Lamela pass it to? Which of those players makes a decoy run to open up the space for another player? Who's the player that we ultimately want to get the ball to? Those things should be decided before we go out on the pitch. If Jose is not doing the tactical training to get the team to know how to attack, him saying in the dressing room, go out and attack, is not enough. And if anything, will lead to more confusion because the players are being told, okay, defend like this, defend like this, defend like this, defend like this, but attack. And he's not giving them the tactical tools to attack. He's not setting up the fullbacks to attack as well as they possibly can. And it's not as though he doesn't know how to do this, because I went on to say, you can't deny that Jose is a tactical genius. You absolutely can't. And people said, what have we seen this season to suggest that he is a tactical genius? I did a video back in, I think it was in November, after our victories against Man City and Ludogorets in the Europa League. That was outlining the tactical parts and the tactical pieces of certain games that allowed us to dominate and allowed us to beat Manchester City. And I'm talking playing Heung-min Son on the right rather than the left to exploit the space left by Joao Cancelo as he stepped up into that double pivot. I'm talking Gareth Bale pulling in really, really narrow to allow the space for the right back to attack down the right-hand side. These little things that Jose has identified and knows will really, really hurt opponents. He still has that tactical knowledge. That is something that will never leave. And again, it comes back to people saying Jose's tactics are outdated. That simply isn't true. Tactics like his, if you look at the detail that he puts into his tactics, there's a fantastic video on the Coach's Voice on YouTube where Jose explains how with Inter Milan in, I think it was 2010, when they went on to win the Champions League, how he beat one of the best Barcelona sides that has ever been, how he kept Messi quiet, how he exploited Dani Alves and right back when he was attacking. All these incredible little trinkets and tiny bits of knowledge, the tiny little decisions and attentions to detail that he had to put into that to win that game. That knowledge doesn't leave you. Now, I did say, look, I said football is a different sport to what it was 15 years ago, never mind 50 years ago, with regards to Jose being similar to Bill Nick and his approach of a man management and how that's not a good thing. But Jose has that tactical knowledge. So I do think, again, a lot of it comes back to the fear that the defense places in the players that are playing with them and also in the manager, because their ability simply isn't there. It's not there. That defense is not good enough. You can talk as much as you want about, oh, well, Dyer was so good under Pochettino, or, Toby has been this fantastic player for so long. Yes, but Toby is aging, and Dyer played in a very different system at a very different position under Mauricio Pochettino. He played in that 2 in midfield with Dembele and slotted back into a 3 at the back when we attacked with Rose and Walker bombing on either side. Not only is that a better system, but you'd have to imagine there was more tactical effort put into or attacking play under Pochettino, because everybody knew exactly what they do. Eriksen would just kind of sit in behind the striker or sit in between the lines and pick up that space. Ali was running in behind the striker. Son would be pulling in off the left. Rose and Walker would be exploiting the space either side. Dembele was sitting behind to kind of control the attack, and then Vertonghen, Alderweireld and Dyer would sit back and just sweep up any mess that happened. And Lloris was good coming off his line as well. You can't pinpoint anything in Tottenham's games this season that shows any sort of a trademark or any sort of a common theme in the way we attack, other than get the ball to Harry Kane. And that is so concerning. That I'd almost rather nothing than simply give that ball to that one player, because Harry Kane's future is not set in stone. He said himself he'll be deciding his future after the Euros. I do think he will stay. I think he will eventually have enough loyalty to stay at the club, but I also think even if he does decide to leave, that he won't have, or that no club will have the money to peel him away from Tottenham. But it's still not good enough that there's just no. I'm struggling to think of the word. There's no trademark. There's nothing you can pinpoint that shows this is what Tottenham are trying to do when we attack. Defensively, it's almost parked the bus. It's not exactly that just yet, but I do feel that Spurs need some sort of identity in our attack. We need any sort of footballing identity. It's what we had under. As Proto says there as well, no identity. It's something that we had under Pochettino. We did lose games. We lost games that we shouldn't have lost. Often in the big games, we fell apart and we crumbled under the pressure. But we had an identity. You knew if you saw Tottenham playing whatever team it was at 3 o'clock on a Saturday, whoever it was, you knew what was going to happen. You knew how Spurs were going to play. And I think there's a stat from that 2016-17 season under Pochettino. I think we won 7 games by 4 goals to 1 at White Hart Lane that season. And in nearly every single one of those games, we were 3-0 up at half-time and just take our foot off the gas in the second half, relax and prepare for the Champions League game that week. And that's what the identity was. You knew we'd come out and we'd attack you fast. You knew we had intensity in our press. We had quick passing in behind in between the lines, and everything that you wanted us to do, we did. But now, like, we can go into a game against Aston Villa, say just before the international break, a very changed team. First of all, there's no identity, not only in the players in our starting 11, but in the formation that we are playing. And 18 months into Jose Mourinho's tenure, that is not good enough. That is a massive concern. And look, again, this all comes back to the board not investing in a squad the way that they should have in the summer. But Jose should still know more about his squad and know more about his players, that he can put out some sort of consistent team. That team against Aston Villa, yes, was the same 11 that played against Newcastle. But look at how different the performances were. Against Villa, there was players interchanging positions. They were like swapping on the wings. There was a high press going. Against Newcastle, it was such a rigid and such a stubborn 4-4-2, where every single player was in the exact same position every single time we had the ball or every single time they had the ball. That is not good enough. A team of Spurs' level should not have this is your quadrant of the pitch. And Ndombele, you play right centre mid. Son, you play left mid, whatever it is. There should be interchanging. There should be versatility and movement in amongst all those players. There just wasn't against Newcastle. And any sort of an identity, any sort of confidence or positivity that we could have taken from that performance against Villa, which, yes, wasn't the best performance of our season. It wasn't the best performance we've ever seen, but it was one that got the job done. It was one where the players fought and the players managed to get that game over the line. Any bit of positivity we could take from that was absolutely crushed in that game against Newcastle, a game that was so important to us after Chelsea losing 5-2 at home to West Brom on Saturday, that we could go away to Newcastle, a team who in their last game before the international break registered three shots against the relegation-threatened rivals in Brighton, had 38% possession. We went there. Yes, they're a bogey team, but they're a team on awful form who simply cannot play football. Their fans are calling for the manager's head and for their owner, and we went there and we were scared, we were afraid, and we played the complete opposite of the way we played against Aston Villa. There was nothing similar in those two games. The starting 11 was the exact same, but nothing else was. We were so lucky that Harry Kane was there on Sunday. Otherwise, we would have lost that game. There's no debating we would have lost that game. 2 goals, him being in the right place, right time, and then him making a good finish. That first goal was an absolute joke. Davinson Sanchez and Jaffa Tanganga unable to lift the ball off the ground, kicking it. And again, it comes back to that stat. Spurs have registered more unsuccessful passes in their own half this season than any other team with 911. You can't make the manager account for individual mistakes, but there's so much that Jose is culpable for. He's coming out in the press again and hounding these players, and it's just getting to the stage where it's just really concerning, and it doesn't feel as though there's anything that will be going our way in the coming weeks or the coming months. I think a lot relies on the cup final against Manchester City and how we're going to come out of that one. And look, if anyone is really confident about that, I think every fan should believe we can win it, because over 90 minutes we can. But in terms of confidence, I really don't think anybody should be going into that with the expectation of Spurs winning. Now, look, I put out a little post on my community feed a while ago asking for a few questions of things we can talk about. We've Arjun Sharma, who said, is Jose an attraction for top players to sign for Tottenham, and maybe even for guys like Kane and Son to stay here? I feel he isn't, because I see Nagelsmann joining Spurs, so if we sack him, we won't be able to attract top level signings. This is something I've spoken about kind of in the last couple of weeks in terms of whether or not Jose is actually an attraction for players. And I think at the moment he is a turn-off, because especially at this stage of his time at Tottenham, I think in his first year he would have been an attraction. Then the second year, where he typically has his success, and then everything falls apart in the third year, we've skipped that second year. And I think from the outside, anybody looking at Spurs right now sees a team who are on the way down and will need a rebuild in the coming months, coming years. And I don't think Jose is going to attract any player to Spurs right now. The promise of trophies that always comes with Mourinho isn't there with Spurs right now. I think we need a lot, and I mean a lot, of investment in the summer, and to somehow convince a handful of players to come in and try and fix our season next year. I think a Sabitzer potentially could want to do it, come to the Premier League. There's talk of Sergio Aguero, which I can't see happening at all. But we somehow need to pinpoint those players that are just below the point of world class that will come to us. Because look, let's be honest, any player that Spurs enter any sort of a transfer negotiation or transfer battle for, we're going to lose to the bigger teams, and we can't really question that. We can't give out about that. It is just the way it is. We will lose those battles. So I at the moment, I don't think Jose is an attraction for anyone. Oliver Ablett asked, is Jose the right manager to rebuild? He's not. He really isn't, and nobody expected him to be. Nobody would have thought that he was. I think when he came in, we knew it was going to be a lot of kind of ripping up the basis and ripping up the platform that Pochettino had put in place for this club to push on in the next couple of decades, in order to get short-term success. And I was one of those fans who accepted that. You know, maybe I would have rathered a Ten Hag or I'm not saying him specifically, but that type of manager. I would have rathered someone like that to continue the work that Pochettino had began. But I kind of thought, look, if we get an FA Cup, if we get a Premier League or a Champions League, it'll be worth it. And that was a genuine expectation a lot of fans had when Jose came in. And I feel it would have been kind of silly to not have that expectation, given the history that he does have. But it's no longer worth it. We needed success from this period with Jose, and a Carabao Cup is not success. Getting back into the Champions League is not success. We needed real, proper silverware. And I really don't think that's going to happen under Jose Mourinho, unfortunately. I think that time is gone. But in terms of a rebuild, he never was the right man for it. I don't think that is why he was brought in. And he's never going to be the manager for that. Tony John Ash says, when are Enoch likely to sell the club? Alistair Gold actually said in one of his videos last week or the week before that he'd be surprised if Enoch are still the Spurs owners in 10 or so years. So I think it's anybody's guess as to when they will pack their bags and go. But look, Alistair Gold, that was his personal opinion rather than anything he'd heard through the club. But I think he is probably the best man to ask that, and he doesn't think Enoch will be in charge in the next 10 years. So I think we could be coming into a time when Enoch could be moving on from the club. And it's no surprise, because with the money they've invested in the training ground and the stadium as well in recent months, recent years, I think a lot of us would have been surprised if they did stay. I think they're setting up to sell the club, getting the value up as high as they possibly can, and move from there, which look isn't the worst thing in the world. Look, make sure you're hitting that like button if you are watching, if you are enjoying this. Make sure to subscribe as well if you're new. We're on the road to 6.3k. If you could share out this video, share out the stream, it would be massively appreciated. We're so close to hitting 1 million views on the channel, which is an insane number to me, one that I never thought we'd be anywhere near. But we're getting so close, so please do share, like, comment, all that good stuff. Dan says, I agree Mourinho is not the man to take Spurs forward. Martin says, would you sell Kane for £120 million and buy Ings, Aguero and Sabitzer? I personally wouldn't. Kane is worth more to this club than those three could ever be. I wouldn't do that one. Paul says, there's no style of play. Players cannot pass to each other. They then panic and punt the ball up the field. We then lose it and the opposition come right back at us. Sue says, I can't see things changing until Levy and Enoch ship out, and they ain't going anywhere soon. Well, look, fingers crossed that's not true. Dara says, 100% you can't blame Jose for the defence. They are shocking, but for me, it's the lie I can't get past. You slander a person on camera, that crosses the line. And that's another thing that I touched on my stream, I think it was on Sunday night, saying let's talk about Jose. And it was the blatant lie around the fact that Toby Alderweireld had missed a COVID test and then missed training on Thursday, when there's evidence. There's some of the Spurs tweeted out on Thursday welcoming Son back to training, and Alderweireld was there in the background training like it was a normal day. And immediately after that quote, I think it was Dan Kilpatrick from the Evening Standard was saying there was confusion within Spurs about why Jose had said that, because it simply wasn't true. So I really don't know where he was going with that. And it is a big concern. I said it immediately. That was something that I can't forgive a manager for. I can't look past that. Dara says, for me, his ego will outweigh what is best for the team. Jose says he learned, but it's ending the exact way for United and Chelsea, less the trophies. Exactly. And that is that 9-month sabbatical that he had when he said he reinvented himself as a manager, as a man. All this crap that we believed simply looks like it's just not true now, because as soon as things started to go wrong, he is back resorting to the same old problems that got him into these exact situations of clubs in the past. But as Dara said a second ago, less the trophies. That's the one thing we're missing. And look, if you do want that loyalty badge like is beside Dara's name in the live chat, Dara, thank you so much for joining the channel memberships. Do hit that join button down below and you've got access to extra content and member call-in shows as well. So please do hit that join button. It's a good way to support the channel as well and getting a little bit extra in return. Lenny says, people need to realise they will never be a rebuild. Money does not grow on trees. We just spend $1 billion on a stadium that is currently empty. Of course, finance is a massive problem now. And I do feel, on that note, that Jose had been promised money when he came to Spurs, but it's just not possible to give him that money right now. I don't think he would have been given the exact amount of money or enough money that he needed, but I do think there would have been more investment in the squad, and maybe without the pandemic, that Skriniar deal could have got done, or that Sabitzer deal might have been done 6 months earlier. But it's so difficult for every single club now, not just Spurs, that things are worse than they would have been without this pandemic. Now, look, you can also say things would be better for other clubs as well, which in turn would kind of be worse for Spurs, if that makes sense. But I do think there would have been more money invested in the squad, and we wouldn't have the same defence. This defence would be completely different if there had been no pandemic. But there was a pandemic, and that's what we need to deal with. And that's another point that I want to bring up. People say Jose is the most successful manager, or one of the most successful managers in the world. He's managed to do this, he's done that, and yes, he's had an immense career. He's had an incredibly successful career, but certain managers suit certain situations. Bit of a tongue twister there. Certain managers suit certain situations, and Jose might not suit this one. I use the example, the just to go to the extremes, but to kind of further put across the point I'm trying to make, if you put Guardiola at Burnley or put Big Sam at Man City, they're really, really good managers who do fantastically in the very situations that they are used to. But when you take them out of their comfort zone, they're not going to be as successful. And this is completely different to anything Jose has done in the past. He's never been, you can say he did it at Porto, but again, that's 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, when every single player in there bought into what he wanted to do. Your Ricardo Carvalho's, your Ferreira's, your anyone else who's in that team, Deco, I think as well. They all bought into what he wanted to do. But that's not happening right now. And that comes back to the point from Daily Hotspur that the culture in football and culture in general has changed, that these players, if they don't want to buy into this, they simply won't, because they can play poorly for 6 months, results go downhill, and Jose will be sacked. And the players know that. The players do know that, because the majority of those players are contracted at the club for longer than Jose is. But if results start to go poorly, it's the manager that will get the axe. It's the manager that we looked at rather than the players themselves. They'll still get their paycheck. They could be sitting on the bench. They could not be playing. They'll still be getting their paycheck. Whereas Jose is the one who could lose his job. Hey says, can you envision Tottenham winning the league or Champions League in the next 3 seasons? I really can't. And it's upsetting to say that, but look, this squad needs to be ripped apart from the core and built back up from the ground, and that's going to take a long, long time. And I don't think Jose is the man to do that. So any trophies in the coming years, I think we have to look past. In terms of the League Cup this season, I'm not confident that we will win it, but it is possible. It really is possible, because anything can happen over 90 minutes. And this is the kind of situation where Jose thrives. In a 90-minute game, knockout game, a cup final, this is where he's at his best. And I think you can talk about the players not fighting for the badge and stuff in Premier League games and stuff like that. But when a trophy's on the line for players who put so much into their time at Spurs, so much effort, so much blood, sweat, tears, and so much time, I think that will mean a lot to them on a personal level in terms of trying to get that trophy. So they may try and win it for themselves, which could in turn win it for the club, which I know is not the reason you want players to go out and win that trophy, but it could work for Spurs. So I think we can win the League Cup this season, but I don't think we will. And I feel like every Spurs fan would be in the same bracket. Ronan says Jose will be the fall guy. Thoughts, Matt? Yeah, he will. It's the same with every manager. And he said something after the game against Newcastle where he said, every manager in world football needs time and everyone gets it except me. He said, I need to be successful immediately. I mean, that's not true. The examples I used were looking at Frank de Boer, Crystal Palace, who got 4 games, Stephen Kenny at Ireland right now. And there's so many managers who have been sacked after such a short space of time. He will be made the fall guy. Perhaps he is the guy culpable. Perhaps he is a deserving scapegoat, but he will. It's always a manager who gets the blame. Bradley says we need to understand Mourinho had overachieved with his defence. We have a cup final and 3 points off top 4. Imagine what Mourinho could do with the players he wants. Exactly. He did overachieve with his defence, and perhaps to some extent he still is, given the lack of goals we've conceded this season. But earlier on in the year, when we beat Man City, then we drew with Chelsea, then we beat Arsenal, we were top of the Premier League. Not one player is going to question Jose. Not one player is going to question the style of play. They're top of the Premier League. That's a team who, let's be honest, should not be anywhere near the top of the Premier League. But they were top of the Premier League. They weren't going to question it. That was the man this saviour, this miracle worker who came in, sat in the dugout and got them to that point. But as soon as things started to go wrong and Jose maybe started criticising them in the press or was too rigid in his tactics, too rigid in the way he wanted to approach games, even when it clearly wasn't working, that's when people start questioning. And that's when people probably should start questioning him, because he needs to adapt. He needs to, when things aren't working, when things clearly are going wrong, he needs to switch it up. He needs to go to something that will work. And that, I think, is where the first player might start to question Jose. And as I said a while ago, with the modern day culture in the dressing room and the player power, the sad truth is one bad apple in the dressing room is enough to completely derail Jose's time at the club. And it seems that is what has happened. Michel Vorm actually spoke out in the YouTube video. I only saw it before I came online, so I didn't actually get to look at it. But apparently he was saying the quality of the defenders isn't enough. You've Kieran Trippier, when he left Atletico Madrid, saying it was a toxic environment that he needed to get out of. You've Gareth Bale going on international duty with Wales and saying it was good mentally to get out of the situation that was developing at the club. It could very well be an extremely toxic dressing room in there, and we're never going to know the full truth of it. If the Amazon documentary had been this season, of course it would be a very, very interesting watch in the summer, but it's not, and we're never going to know the full extent of what is going on in that dressing room unless there's an exposed all interview in the coming years. I really doubt there will be, but Spurs they're on a tightrope right now. We could be in massive trouble. We really, really could be going downhill fast, or we could be in a position where maybe spend a bit of money in the summer, things start to get a little bit better. Maybe then next season can be a successful one for us. Maybe we need to sack Jose to do that. Maybe we do need to let Kane go and rebuild the squad. There's so many different things that you could look at that could help his club. But the one thing you can't deny is that we're in a very dangerous situation, and things could be bad for Spurs very soon. And we're going to take a quick break on the stream. I'll be back very, very shortly. But if there is anyone new to the channel, please do smash that subscribe button. And if you don't know what this channel is about, here's a quick message. Martin says here, football is like a language. You're constantly learning and expanding your vocabulary. Football is the same. Jose refuses to learn. His lack of attacking training is an example of that. He only coaches what he knows. And that is a very good point and a very relevant one that I think I always bring back to the example of Arsene Wenger. And look, I hate to do it, obviously, as a Spurs fan, but when he first came into Arsenal in, was it 1995, he was seen as someone who was 10 years ahead of football. You know, he was ahead of the game. He's bringing in a new kind of style of football from France and all this. It was working so well. He won 3 leagues with them. He had the invincible seasons, all that. But what eventually happened then was he got to the stage where football caught up with him. In that 10 years, in 2005, football had caught up with him. And he never adapted his own game. So he continued to play the way he had. He continued with the philosophies and the things that mattered to him continued throughout his entire tenure at Arsenal. And then by the time in 2016, 2017, when he was sacked, he was 10 years behind the game. Because he never changed. His style of play, his man management, everything about him worked so well when he first came to Arsenal. He's like, okay, well, I'll just do this forever. It's bound to work forever. That's not the case. Things change. Football changes. Player culture changes. Fan culture changes. Everything moves with the time. And football is changing faster than it ever has before. I don't think anyone can deny that. It is changing at such a rapid pace. And look, you're looking at the European adventure Mino Raiola is going on to try and sell Haaland, asking for 20 million for him, 20 million for his dad, and then 30 million for Haaland. That never before would you have thought that something like that was even possible. Football culture is changing, and Jose needs to adapt. He needs to catch up with the times, and if he doesn't, he runs the risk of going down as a failure. In hindsight, when you're looking at like this kind of the younger football fans, I think I'm kind of on that side where I can see the value and success that he has had, but this new generation of football fans will see him as the man who failed at Man United, who absolutely capitulated at Spurs, and whatever job he takes next, if there is another job that he's able to get next, that will be his legacy for this new generation of football fans. That's not good enough, and that is not something that you'd want to happen to a manager who has been as successful as he has been. But that is what's happening, and that is what is going to be left behind for him. Bobsport TV, Bobby, thank you so much for tuning in. Says Bill Nick had an identity for his team pretty much immediately. Jose does not have one 18 months in, and I absolutely agree with you. I really do. Just for anyone who is tuning in late, because I know this the title of this stream is a bit of a strong one. It was just basically the man management style of Jose and Bill Nicholson is fairly similar. I was going to read that quote again. So this is a quote I read in a magazine that is about Bill Nicholson, but for me ranks so true in so many ways about Jose Mourinho. You have to be patient with Bill Nick. He would start most interviews by saying he had nothing to say and would then talk from the soul about the game he loved. Bill was at his most quotable in defeat and would show no mercy to any player he felt had given less than 100%. Quote following a Spurs defeat at Crystal Palace in 1969, he said, "I can forgive anything but lack of effort. Today there were some players who should feel ashamed of their performance. I will not tolerate anybody giving less than their best. It is an insult to our supporters." That is, look, from Bill Nick in 1969. It's something that we're still hearing from Jose Mourinho today. And again, it's not his tactics, I think, that are outdated. It's everything else. And is him being a tactical genius enough to account for everything else that he's lacking? I don't think so anymore. Arthur, always good to see you tuning in. Arthur says, Bill Nicholson would never allow players to have player power. He would get rid of them. What he said was law. When they went out to, or when they go out to play, Jose's right is to say things about the players. Exactly. Look, he can do that. He can say what he wants. But I think we need to account for the changes in culture in general, in society, not just within football. And like saying things like that about players isn't gonna work anymore. And look, you can argue with Ndombele, it did work. After the defeat at Burnley last season, Jose called Ndombele out publicly. And look, for a couple of weeks, couple of months after that, Ndombele was at his worst, but he's come back stronger than ever. After the game against Stoke in the Carabao Cup earlier this season, Jose said things about Dele Alli. He had his worst period. It looked then as though he may come back strong. He had a good week or two in the team, but it's okay. It's not okay, but it's forgivable, and it can work when you're doing that to one player at a time, if you want to call out Ndombele or Dele Alli. But what happens every time you do that with a player is they go into a lull where they're just furious, they're angry. This manager has betrayed me, he said this publicly, this, that, the other thing, them trying to cope with what has been said about them. But then they come back stronger, and then they get themselves back into the team, and they try and prove the manager wrong. But what happens when you do it the way Jose is doing it now, when he's doing it so often and he's doing it to the entire team at once, what happens is every single player within that team goes into that lull of, well, he clearly doesn't think we're good enough, what's the point of trying, or I don't want to be here anymore, this, that, the other thing. And all of a sudden, there's no one to drag those players out of the lull because they're all in it. And the form is getting worse. The comments are going to get worse because everything is getting worse with these players not wanting to give their all for a manager who clearly doesn't think they're good enough. So with every player in that lull, it's going to be impossible for anybody to climb out of it. And that, I feel, is why Jose's time at a lot of clubs has ended so in such a toxic atmosphere, toxic environment. And it's happening at Spurs now again. And are we going to get out of it? Is Jose really the man who can fix the situation that is developing at the club? Only time will tell. It's going to take a long time for us to kind of look at anything like that and try and figure out exactly where Spurs is going at a club. It's looking worrying, but we do have Manchester United next. It's the next challenge for us at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday. It's going to be a huge test for the squad and a huge indicator of just how our season is going to end. I think a defeat in this one and we can kiss Champions League goodbye if we haven't already with that draw against Newcastle. I do want to thank everybody who has tuned in over the last 40 or so minutes. There's still 70 people watching, so please do smash that like button if you haven't already. Make sure to subscribe if you are new for watch-alongs, the Tottenham Fan Voice podcast, reviews, views, and more of these kind of analysis, kind of Spurs chat videos, I suppose, is the best way to put them. Thank you for the likes, the comments, everyone who's subscribed and all that. I really do appreciate all the support on the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.